One of the challenges of living in late liberal modernity is that we're not evolutionarily prepared to live in such conditions. Busy cities with sharp right angles of concrete and metal, separated from nature, not speaking to the people around us. Further to that, we're also surrounded by what's known as superstimuli. A superstimuli is any substance, behaviour or thing that's far beyond anything our ancestors would have encountered. Ergo, we're not evolutionarily prepared to handle it. Our brains don't quite know what it is because it's so powerful. Now this is where the idea that dopamine is the modern devil comes in. Now let's be clear, dopamine isn't bad in and of itself. It actually has a natural purpose. Dopamine, as many of you may already know, is a neurotransmitter. That essentially means it carries messages around the brain. It informs us what our behaviour means to ourselves. For instance, back in the day, if we were out hunting and trying to track down a beast, say, and we actually caught that beast and got a nice meal, dopamine would tell us that the seeking actually worked and to engage in more of that behaviour down the line to keep ourselves alive. Now, as you can imagine, that's all well and good if you're in a natural environment when you're adhering to the rhythms of nature. But what if that dopaminergic system can be hacked? Because that's exactly what's happened in our modern day. In the modern world, we have a sort of excess. You could go and eat 10 Big Macs today if you wanted to. It's not a very good idea, but you could. Further to that, we have modern advertising. We have screens around us all the time, flashing at us constantly. This is all hacking the mind into a mode of seeking. As you might imagine, dopamine plays a key role in any form of drug addiction. Here's a statement from the US National Institute on Drug Addiction. They state, just as drugs produce intense euphoria, they also produce much larger surges of dopamine, powerfully reinforcing the connection between consumption of the drug, the resulting pleasure, and all the external cues linked to the experience. Large surges of dopamine, quote, teach the brain to seek drugs at the expense of other healthier goals and activities. Now you might think, well, that's all well and good, but I'm not a drug addict, so this doesn't really matter to me. However, unfortunately, we all have the same brain structure, whether we're drug addicts or not. And some very clever and quite evil people out there have figured this out. This is from Martech, a big marketing and advertising website. I often feel that marketers and advertisers get away with a hell of a lot in the modern era, but anyway, this piece is titled How Dopamine Fuels the Golden Rule of Content Marketing. The subtitle, We Can Leverage the Brain's Reward System to Engage Customers with Value-Based Content. In essence, this is just a scummy way of saying we're going to hack people's natural drivers to convince them to buy things that they don't really need, and at the end of the day they won't be satisfied with anyway, i.e. buyer's remorse, but they'll feel that the only thing that can satisfy them is buying something else, and will keep them locked in that chain. I am semi-convinced that many marketers have been detached from a key unit of their soul. It's probably why some of them write paragraphs such as this: anticipation is marketing gold, and dopamine is the currency that leads to a richer bottom line. Do you have the Midas touch? As a marketing professional, you're interested in influencing behaviour to help your business succeed, and that starts with dopamine. Now, in our modern life, we've fallen into a sort of trap via digital media and smartphones, and it's taken over a lot of our thinking. You see, if you're on an average train in this day and age, everyone is looking at their phone. I'm not trying to have a go at people. I do this too. I know I've woken up in the morning before and thought, I'll check YouTube, see if any interesting videos have come out. I'll go on Twitter, see if there's any beef, any arguments going on. Now, that's a sign that there's a dopaminergic yearning inside of me for some sort of completion. Now, I'm not trying to badmouth staying in touch with the news or seeing what's going on with your favourite creators. I think that's fine. But it's when we get lost in that almost addictive cycle of keeping up to date with the breaking news. We see that a lot on the television today. Everything's always sudden. Now, you've got to stay really fixed on this. Anything could happen right now and it's going to be massive. It's about keeping you in that sense of perma-crisis. That's always looking at the screen, thinking that the big news is just about to come. Now, every now and again, it will come, but then they'll pump you full of reviews and analysis, which never really ends. Perhaps one of the darker forms of this in the modern era is gambling. If you watch sport, you'll know how unrelenting gambling advertising is. Now, fortunately, I've never had a problem with gambling, but every time I watch sport, I do think about the people that do, because you can't watch football highlights, you can't even go to a football game without the advertising boards flashing up gambling websites all the time. It's unrelenting. And when you look at the adverts, they're full of bright colours. But it's not just gambling. Social media is probably the most famous example. This is especially challenging for youngsters. The older you are, the less likely you are to be impacted by this because you didn't grow up with digital media penetrating your brain. As researcher Anna Lemke states here as to why social media is so addictive, we're wired to connect. It's kept us alive for millions of years in a world of scarcity and ever-present danger. Moving in tribes safeguards against predators, optimizes scarce resources, and facilitates pair bonding. Our brains release dopamine when we make human connections, which incentivizes us to do it again. She continues on to explore the super stimuli I mentioned at the top of the video. She says our brains aren't equipped to process the millions of comparisons the virtual world demands. Now that can lead to many of the issues that you see in young people these days. Body dysmorphias, feeling like they're failing because every time they go on social media, people present a very happy picture of their lives. However, she also states upon signing off, the brain is plunged into a dopamine deficit state as it attempts to adopt the unnaturally high levels of dopamine social media just released, which is why social media often feels good while we're doing it, but horrible as soon as we stop. Again, this is just a quasi-addiction. Another modern-day addiction in a similar vein is pornography. Now, some people think that, how bad can pornography be? It's just like back in the day, isn't it, where we drew a naked woman on a wall of a cave. Well, it's not really like that anymore. There is just limitless videos, millions upon millions, doing all sorts of acts. And many youngsters especially get into this stuff and then they crave that dopamine hit, so they start searching for more extreme stuff. As this report states as well, watching pornography can rewire the brain to a more juvenile state. As the psychiatrist Norman Doidge explains, pornography satisfies every one of the prerequisites for neuroplastic change. When pornographers boast that they are pushing the envelope by introducing new, harder themes, what they don't say is that they must because their customers are building a tolerance to the content. This piece continues, porn scenes like addictive substances are hyperstimulating triggers that lead to unnaturally high levels of dopamine secretion. This can damage the dopamine reward system and leave it unresponsive to natural sources of pleasure. This is why users begin to experience difficulty in achieving arousal with a physical partner. So, whether it's food, drugs, alcohol, sex, gambling, pornography, each of these things is a super stimuli in this day and age that can overinflate the dopamine going through our minds. Now, this high level of dopamine, once it starts to wear off, creates all sorts of challenges such as aggressive behavior, anxiety, trouble sleeping, stress, and of course, addiction. Now, this is why I believe we need to build some consciousness around these issues, because there's an opportunity to take a bit of our own soul back from the modern world. Even just putting your phone down and going out for a walk in nature by yourself can calm your nervous system right down. It can also get us in the practice of not being near modern media, which is basically where modernity gets us. Now, this is just basic starters for now, but there are people starting to engage in what are known as dopamine detoxes to try and bring back their brain functioning to baseline, to experience a natural happiness once more. This is something I'm hoping to build in the near future. I'm looking to create some courses that can take people out of modernity. As I say, I think strong, happy, healthy men create a better culture. Depressed men, anxious men, men stuck in the cycle of addiction and modernity keeps us trapped. It keeps us in a state of bondage. So if you're interested in this, do consider joining the Substack. It's linked down below. There's a lot more to come down the line because I think this stuff is very, very important. However, do let me know your thoughts on all this down below and do consider subscribing to the channel if you're new.